Austin. How are you today?
Good, Dad. How are you?
Good. I'm excited. Our journey is going to take us inside the heart and mind of one of the leading sports performance psychologists and author of the best-selling book, Winning the Mental Game, the playbook of building champion mindsets. This is a story about transformational thinking as a way of life inside the arena of performance excellence. My name is Ken Karcher, and alongside me today is my son Austin, and would like to welcome Dr. Amber Selking as our guest to Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time. Welcome, Dr. Selking.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
We are too. Well, let's kick it off, Dr. Selking, and take you back to when you were just a little girl growing up in the Selking home, and tell us about your home and describe your childhood.
Yeah, so my maiden name's Latner. I grew up in a small town. I was born in Ohio and then raised in a small town in northeastern Pennsylvania. So I joke, but unfortunately, maybe fortunately, it's true. We had more cattle than humans, and we had one stoplight, so that was a big deal. But grew up with an awesome mom and dad who, instilled really core values in terms of work ethic and the importance of family and ultimately the importance of having a grounded faith. So I was really grateful for that. My mom jokes, just so everybody doesn't think they're talking to an angel over here, but my mom jokes, she's like, I let you play as much soccer as possible when you were young. And I was really glad you had Jesus, because otherwise I was afraid you would have wound up in jail. And I was like, Mom, that's aggressive. And she's like, you were aggressive. And so really thankful to have that as a foundation in my life. But, my dad, my dad had McDonald's franchises. So that was his first job when he was 14 years old, and then worked his way up from the trash boy to be an owner operator. And so got to be raised in that sort of family business entrepreneurial world. My mom was an extension agent in Ohio for 20 years. So was also, when we moved to Pennsylvania, she was able to help my dad with the business and stay home with us. But we raised livestock. So I grew up raising lambs and pigs and taking care of animals every day before school and after school. And then I was a soccer player, and my faith was really important to me. So, as I think about my childhood and reflect back on it, it was really neat to be able to have a foot in the business world, in the athletic world, in the livestock world, and in the faith community. And so I got to, we had one African-American family in my hometown, and he was our town doctor. So we weren't raised with much actual diversity. But the groups of people I got to be around were very diverse in the work that they endeavored in. But I was, able to see at a very young age just the thread that ran through all of that. There were really good people in each of those spaces, and there were really average people and some bad people in all of those spaces. But this thread of hard work and taking care of people, that it can lead to success. And so I'm really thankful that that was the foundation of how I grew up in those diverse spaces, but with really similar threads of high performing people.
We got to ask the question, do you still like McDonald's?
I love McDonald's. There's a joke that if you're raised in the business, you have ketchup in your veins. And so I certainly do. And I have a lot of McDonald's stock, so I'll take that too.
When you look back, Amber, at your growing up in the Selking home, how would you say if there was one thing that really influenced who you are today? What would that be?
My mom and I are super close, and I'm close to my whole family, but my mom, in terms of the long haul of her just coaching and training and developing me into, who God's created me to be. I was really fortunate that she stewarded my energy and intensity and passion in a really healthy way. And, I see a lot of people and a lot of kids that have that, and it can sometimes get squashed or stamped out or made fun of, and she just really cultivated me in what I was really healthy ways. And then, I had a nanny growing up when I was little, when we lived in Ohio, from when I was born till when we moved when I was 7. And she's another really there's a lot of critical people in my life, but in terms of my faith context, she'd show up every morning just as chipper as can be. And we'd talk to Jesus all day, and we'd thank Jesus when things went well. And we'd ask Jesus for forgiveness when we messed up. And so growing up, I went to church camp when I was too young, but she was a counselor. So she took me with her, and they were talking about the bride of Christ. And when you're little, you don't know what that means, except, I was a flower girl in my older cousin's wedding. And so I knew that, okay, well, the bride of Christ. So Jesus someday is going to pick a woman to marry. And I knew that would be Grams. I call her Grams because she was the most godly person I know. So I used to pray every night that, Jesus, I know you're going to marry Graham someday, but like, I'm really close to her. And so I just really want to be your flower girl. And so that was like, you think awesome about the purity of prayers like that from little minds and hearts. And so I really attribute just like the relational, ever present nature of my faith to her, and how she lived and operated and modeled that. And I'm grateful she's still in my life today at 80 some years old. She's still swimming a mile every day and working out at the gym. I mean, she's just a little firecracker, and I love her so much.
Now, describe for us a little bit your relationship with your dad, and then maybe a memorable conversation with, it could be your mom or your dad.
Yeah. So my dad, hard worker, and, was, now that we have a little girl, she's going to be 2 here in a couple weeks. Like, I don't know how they did it. Like, he worked so much. And yet I don't think he was ever not at a game. And so, you just have a renewed sense of gratitude and appreciation for your parents when you start having these little humans running around, and you see like how much it took to do what they did in terms of raising a family and putting food on the table. And yet as a little kid, I thought my dad worked all the time. And, I was mad that Christmas mornings he'd go to the stores first before we could, do presents after, obviously, after the Santa thing evaded. And I just think to myself, like, well, what a great leader though, because he had people in the restaurants, that in these local little communities that we had our stores, and he was there, and always present. And so I just really appreciate the work ethic and kind of the building of the American dream that we were able to witness through him. So he just retired after 40 years, and it's a pretty cool story to see how that unfolded for him. But we got a memorable conversation. There were so many, but I guess I remember one driving home from school. My mom, I'm sure, Austin, as apparently there's the season of life where parents are just basically Uber drivers for their children. And so we were coming home from school, and, I was upset because, all I ever did was my animals and soccer, and we were gone every weekend for tournaments. And so I didn't do anything fun, with kids in school, and didn't get invited. Even when I could, I never got invited to things. And I was like upset about that. My mom's like, listen, they don't have your dreams. And so they're not going to understand your lifestyle. And if these are your dreams, then you need to be okay with that. Cause my dream was to play Division I college soccer. And so that was really memorable in terms of letting go of wanting or needing acceptance from other people, and particularly people that might not have same dreams or aspirations, not saying better or worse, just different. And the reality of what your life needs to look like, if those things really are on your heart.
Right. Tell us who influenced your passion for soccer.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I just started playing when I was like in 3rd grade, and I loved it. And I was like really aggressive, and they let me play with the boys, and they let me play up. And then I didn't know, but I actually got kicked out of our school league because I was too aggressive. My mom like tells me these things like decades later, and she's like, "Oh no, we had to go find a club team because they said you weren't allowed to play there anymore." I was like, "What?" So like the fact that she just like not fabricated, but like this whole story was like, "Oh, it's time to move up. Like now we have to go play club ball." Right, and so I don't know. I just fell in love with the game. It was an outlet for all of my energy. It was, if you've never played soccer, you might be surprised at how aggressive and physical of a sport soccer really is. And so that really appealed to me. And then I was really fortunate to have some good coaches that taught me some fundamentals, but it was just something that was offered at our small country school growing up. And I kind of just fell in love with. I burnt myself out though by like 7th grade, and I decided I was going to go play college basketball. So I took a year off and played. I always played basketball, but like I played basketball heavy that year. And then I realized that I was like not going to be taller than 5'3" maybe on a good day, and that might have been a prerequisite. So I went back to soccer.
Yeah. Who were some of your heroes growing up?
Heroes growing up. I don't know. I'm not like a big hero person. I had really good role models, and I was really grateful. My grandparents, on my mom and dad I was really close to them, and I called my grandma every day. She was like my confidant, especially when I needed to complain about my mom. And so, like I had them in my life and Grams, and then I had some great teachers, but I was never really into the hero type thing. Wasn't a vibe that we had a lot. But again, I guess I would think of them more as role models and than necessarily heroes.
Go to high school, Austin.
Okay, tell us a little bit about your high school experience, and I guess you've already told us you played basketball and you played soccer. You play anything else?
No, I tried track, but that was not my gig. I had me waiting in blocks for a gun to go off was not good. The adrenaline, I couldn't handle it. I had an older brother. He was 3 years older than me, and we were kind of best friends. And then, freshman, I was a freshman, he was a senior, and he was going to college. And I was like, whoa, what am I going to do when he leaves? And I remember I had this project, and I was like, whatever, that's good enough. And I caught myself, and I was like, that's good enough? Like, who are you? You never say that. And I got scared, actually, that I was going to accept mediocrity in my life. And I had this like freshman year crisis. And my aunt and uncle randomly moved to Nebraska, and I looked it up, and I found a really good club team, and I contacted the coach, and I had them come watch me in regionals. And I talked to my aunt, and they said I could move in with them for the year. And then I put this whole proposal to my parents and said, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life when Kyle leaves, and I'm afraid I'm going to succumb to mediocrity, and I can't live in Montrose, Pennsylvania anymore. And so here's my plan. What do you think? And they were like, I mean, if you feel like this is what God's calling you to do, then okay. So I moved to Nebraska my sophomore year of high school and went to a public high school, played soccer there, played on this club team, which is about 30 minutes in Omaha away from Blair, which is another small town in the middle of nowhere. And I had a great experience. But at the end of that, I was ready to go home, and it really put things in perspective for me. And I knew I only had 2 more years left in Montrose before I would be out. And it really just recalibrated my spirit in a really healthy way. And I went back and I had a great high school experience, and I had a great elementary experience, a great high school experience. I talked to my brother and sister, and they're like, where did you grow up? I was like, the same place you did. I don't know why you didn't love it so much. Like, I thought I had great teachers. I thought we had a great community. Right. And so I had a great time, and I worked really hard, and my brother was valedictorian. And so it was my goal to be valedictorian too. And had, got that by 1 extra AP class than the salutatorian. So I was thankful for it. And, my senior year, we went and toured a lot of colleges, and everywhere we went, I was like, oh my God, I love it. Like, I am going to be a bulldog. And I'm like, oh, nope, I'm going to be a Nittany Lion. Wait, I'm going to be, everywhere I went, I just loved. And so my mom and I were driving to Indiana to visit Valparaiso, Purdue, and Ball State. And as we're driving on 8090, we pass a sign that says Notre Dame. And I was like, Notre Dame's in Indiana? And she was like, I don't know, I guess. And so I look it up on the computer that night and I was like, wow, they won the national championship in women's soccer last year. And she's like, wow, who knew? Because, we got 4 stations on TV. Like, we didn't watch college sports. I didn't watch soccer. Like, we didn't watch TV at all, really. And so I called the coach and I said, hey, like, we're in Indiana doing this tour. Could we meet? And he's like, yeah, swing by on your way through. So we stopped. And after I had, was going to become a chirp chirp and then, a Boilermaker. And then I remember opening the truck door. I took 3 steps on campus and I looked at my mom and I was like, this is where I'm going to go to college. Like, it wasn't excitement. It wasn't like, like, everywhere else I'd been. It was just this sense of peace and this sense of knowing, to what now I would attribute to just like the presence of the Holy Spirit on campus. And so we met with the coach and it was great. And he invited me to camp that summer. And like, I trained, every day to Here Come the Irish and had a little wristband on that I wore all the time. And then I realized how hard it was to get into Notre Dame. I was like, oh, this is like, I don't know how realistic this is actually going to be, And so I remember I was in our hot tub one night out under the stars. Like, there's no lights out there. It's just beautiful. And I was just praying and I was like, all right, God, well, I'm going to go in and I'm going to turn my application in early action. And if I get accepted to Notre Dame, that's where I'll go, because there's no reason I should get accepted unless this is your plan for my life. And so I went inside, I submitted my application like the night of the deadline. I didn't have anybody read it. And I had everybody, I had my English teachers, everybody was reviewing my stuff. And so then, that was maybe August or something. And months went on and I was getting really heavily recruited by West Point and the Naval Academy. And, it feels really good to get recruited. And I hadn't really heard it. I mean, I went to soccer camp at Notre Dame. It was great, but they're not like actively, trying to get me to come on the roster. And so I just, I really fell in love with the idea of the service academies, and I love our great country and have such appreciation for the men and women that protect it. And then I started thinking like, wow, I don't think everybody can jump out of planes and blow things up. And I think I could. So then I started to have this like deep sense of responsibility to do that. And so I committed to the Naval Academy actually on November 11th. If you athletes, right? Like, your numbers are really important to you. Yeah. My number was 11. So 11, it was perfect. And then like 2 weeks later, I get 2 letters in the mail. One was from Annapolis that said I'd failed the hearing exam and that I would not be admitted into the academy. And so I like burst into tears, because when you get yourself in the mindset that like you're going into the academy, I mean, you got to get there, And then the other one was a letter from Notre Dame that said, welcome home. You've been admitted to the class of 2010. And then I cried again and then like my, deal with God came back in my mind. And I was like, well, I have to go to Notre Dame, but I've made this commitment and I'm like a person of my word. And so the Navy ended up clearing my hearing. They took it to the Admiral and I got a medical admission. But then I told the coaches, I said, well, listen, I haven't told the story in so long. Like, I forgot these things to be now. I was like, I told these coaches, I was like, listen, like I made a deal with God and I got into Notre Dame and now I'm really not sure what to do. And they're like,
what did they think when you said that?
Like, I mean, they're like, and like, the newspapers were like asking like, where are you going to go to school? And they're like, well, I was like, I'm waiting on God to tell me. They're like, what is wrong with you? And so I was playing in an indoor game and I got taken out from behind and I got my ACL torn. And it was 3 days before the Notre Dame deadline to either accept. And as I'm falling, screaming, I'm thinking, well, guess I'm going to Notre Dame, because like I was ready to graduate high school for years. And the options with the academy were to go through a plebe summer with a torn ACL, which I just didn't think was feasible. Go to a 5th year military high school or take a year off and come the next year. And I just felt like this was, God's, hey, and Coach Randy Waldrum, said, hey, I told you I was a recruited walk-on, so I didn't get a scholarship. But he said, I told you if you got admitted, you'd be on the team. So welcome home. And that was that's how I wound up at Notre Dame. And that was kind of the culmination of my high school journey.
It's an awesome
You know,
story.
Amber, I was reading your bio, and in your bio, you make this statement. I'd love you to share this with our guests, but you talked about how this injury really started to help you rethink your identity. What does that mean?
Yeah, I remember. So it was actually, so I rehabbed, I redshirted fall of my freshman season. We went undefeated and lost in the national championship game against North Carolina. So I'm still a little salty with Baby Blue. But had a really good spring. And, I was that kid that every day after practice, I was like asking the seniors, how'd I do? What do I need to do better? And all this stuff. And they were like, hey, you're coming along, blah, blah, blah. And I went in for my end of the year meeting with my coaches, and they looked at me and they're like, how would you feel if you weren't on the team next year? And I was like, I mean, what do you mean? Like, everything I've done since I've been 7 was to be doing this. So you tell me how I'm going to feel if you take that away from me. And then they go, come back in 2 hours and we'll tell you what we decided. And I'm like, this is finals had just started. It's my freshman, spring. And so I leave and I just go across the street and I open my email because I couldn't really study at that point. And I was getting daily devotionals from FCA at the time. And so when I went to college, my college number was 29 because 11 was taken and 2 + 9 = 11. Okay. And so I would sign everything ALAT Jeremiah 29:11. And I thought to myself, like, oh, if anybody ever reads this verse, it's my numbers and it's a good verse, whatever. So I'm reading this daily devotional pops up and I open it and it starts with Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans that I have for your life, says the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. And I just started crying because I knew it was over. Like, I knew I was going to go back and they were going to tell me that I was going to get released. Yeah. And it's just cool how God works, like I had written that basically every day for the last 9 months, thinking that it was for someone else, when really, like, God was just anchoring it in my heart so that I had something to hold on to. So I went back across the street and I was like, they're not going to see me cry again. So I just bit the inside of my mouth apart and like just kept saying Jeremiah 29:11, and they wound up releasing me and I shook their hands and walked out. And I remember standing on the corner of the Jack where our coaches' offices used to be. And I like started to walk one way and I was like, well, I can't go that way. That's where the weight room is. And that's just for athletes. And I'm not an athlete anymore. And then it's like, well, if I go, and then I started walking to my dorm and I'm like, well, what if somebody says something about soccer? Like, I'm not even a soccer player anymore and I'm wearing soccer gear. And I just like stood there and I was frozen. And like, for the first time in my life, I felt hollow from like the base of my neck to the bottom of my stomach. And I was like, if I'm not Amber, the soccer player, like, who am I, And I didn't tell anybody. Like, I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell anybody. I told one person at Notre Dame, Harold Swanigan. He's like my big brother. He played basketball at Notre Dame. And he was the faculty rep for FCA. And I saw him passing through campus and he's like, yo, what's up? Like, how was spring? And I was like, I got cut from the soccer. I just like burst into tears. And he's like this massive human, and he's like hugging me and pats me on the back. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I might transfer like a play. And he was like, yeah, sounds like you got a lot of decisions on your mind, but I think God wants you to run FCA. So like, if you choose to come back, like the organization's yours. And he's like, once an athlete. I was like, but I'm not even an athlete anymore. And he's like, once an athlete, always an athlete. And, he's the reason I stayed at Notre Dame, because it gave me a sense of purpose and a sense of hope and a sense of belonging still. But through all that, like, it really made me just think like, I felt hollow and I had an identity crisis, and I have a family at home that loves me. I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and I'm at the University of Notre Dame, like fairly certain my life is going to be okay. Like, imagine people that don't have any of those things. Right. And that was really the driving force in why I wanted to lead FCA. It became the driving force of pursuing the field of sports psychology when that became like an option in my life. It was the driving force of, I chose to do my dissertation on the transition experience out of the NFL. And, a lot of all the work that I do today is, I can help people be a better football player, better executive through mental performance training. But, the reality of it is, what I know is that these are the things that will be there when that identity change happens, right? Eventually,
Amen.
whether it's tomorrow after injury or 4 years after a college career, or 40 years after a professional career, So it was a really important experience in my life.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I mean, that, those are the intimate seasons in our life and stories in our life that a lot of times, not many people get to hear those things, but they're also the things that sometimes are the turning point in our lives and change of perception. So we appreciate your vulnerability there. So we transition, you go through college. Can you tell us a little bit, life after college, and walk us through your career and how you kind of got started?
Yeah, my undergrad is in management consulting. I thought I was going to be a consultant in Chicago, move to the city, travel the world, solve business problems. And I didn't get job offers. I got one real job offer, and it was to a manufacturing company doing human resources. And at Notre Dame, you don't go into manufacturing, and HR isn't really a thing, And so, but it was kind of the only offer I got. So I took it. And my mom always jokes, she's like, I just think it's funny that you're the one managing safety and enforcing the rules. So you can imagine my life as an HR professional. So anyways, I did that, and I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. It was an incredible experience. I was in this rotational program where I moved every 3 to 6 months to a different city. So I was in Charlotte, then in Raleigh, then off the coast of Carolina, in Newport, North Carolina, then moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then to Detroit. And so got to see a lot, do a lot. But 2 weeks into sitting in front of a computer, I called my mom and I was like, this is inappropriate. You're not supposed to say this, but this is a true story. So I called her and I was like, I'm going to slip my wrist right here at this computer screen. And she's like, oh, rough day at the office, huh? And I was like, I cannot wake up when I'm 40, looking at something this ridiculous that does not matter in the world. And she's like, well, why don't you just go back to grad school? I'm like, Mom, you have to know what you're going to grad school for. And she's like, well, just Google sports psychology. My mom doesn't talk like this, but when I tell this story, I feel the need to use that voice. And at that point, my mom didn't know what Google it meant, right? And we had talked about every career under the sun and never sports psychology. So I was like, where did you even pull that out of? So I was like, okay, thanks, love you, bye. And I hung the phone up and I was like, okay, well, if you learn anything, it's that your mom's usually right. So I Googled sports psychology grad school, and the University of Denver popped up, and I read through the coursework, and it was the psychology of excellence, team and organizational dynamics, positive psychology, organizational leadership. And I just had this clarity about what I was supposed to do with my life. And it was everything that I had taught through Notre Dame Christian athletes through the lens of the Bible, and faith and identity and mindset and purpose and passion and community and all the stuff, I was like, there's a science behind all of this, and if you start with faith, some people are open to that and some people aren't. So it kind of narrows your entryway. And I was like, well, shoot, if I could learn the science behind this, everybody thinks science is great. So I could talk to anybody about this stuff. And so again, I told you I'm a person of commitment. I made a commitment to this company for 2 years. So my plan was to study for the GRE, take the GRE, go through the whole application process. And that would take you about 2 years. And then at the end of it, I could say hey, is this really what I feel like God's calling me to into sports psych? Or have I found a sense of purpose in my role here? And do I stay? So I worked the plan, and at the end of 2 years, had a job offer and had a grad school offer, and just really felt more compelled than ever that that's what I was supposed to do. So I moved to Denver and did my master's 2-year program at the University of Denver, and was planning on launching my consulting company right after that to work with individual sports teams and business organizations. And I went to a sports psych conference in New Orleans. Actually, wow, our cities of Denver and New Orleans and South Bend. That's so wild. The intersections here as I'm telling the story.
Papa's tapestry.
I know, right? And so I go to the grad school fair because I wanted to check the box that said, well, I looked at PhD programs, but none of them were right for me. And so I was basically if it's a relatively short program, if it's really applied, and if I can do my research on whatever I want to, then I'll get my PhD. But I felt pretty confident that that didn't exist. So I do a lap around this grad school fair so that I could get back on the town in New Orleans, as you can imagine. And I stopped at the University of Missouri and started talking to these guys, and they're like, oh yeah, we're in this program and it's like a 3-year program. It's really applied. You get to do your research on whatever you want it to. And I was like, seriously, God, I do not want to do more school. But I was like, all right, well, looks like I'm getting a PhD, and so had the opportunity to go to Missouri, and it just really, I feel like I got a scientific foundation from the University of Denver. And then I felt like I got the art at the University of Missouri, because my grad school advisor, Dr. Rick McGuire, he's kind of like a grandfather in the field of sports psychology. He was a head track and field coach for 30 years at Mizzou, and started the USA track and field sports psychology program. So he was a coach, and he knew the field of sports psych. And so I got to just learn what it's really like to do the work inside of a program with real coaches and real athletes and real organizational dynamics that are sometimes good and sometimes not. Yeah. It was such a gift and a blessing. And so, I'll do the next phase of life, right? I was traveling from Missouri to Pennsylvania to go home for Christmas, and I stopped in South Bend to, network, reconnect with friends and family, stayed here for about 3 days. Went to basketball practice with Harold Swanigan, my guy I told you about earlier. So I was at men's basketball practice. We were having life talk, just on the side of the court, watching practice. And I'd been, had some drinks with Coach Bray the night before, just talking about mental performance and what it would look like in the organization. So he had invited me to practice, and Swanee's like, why ain't you married? And I was like, hey, settle down, I'm doing stuff. And, I was 28 at the time. And I was like, I don't know. I just haven't found the one guy I want to be with forever. And he was like, all right, well, I don't know, maybe figure that out. And I was like, well, hook me up. And so, we had that conversation. And then I went with one of my girlfriends as a wing woman to an ugly Christmas sweater party in South Bend. And we were going to stay for an hour. We literally set a timer on our phones for an hour, and we walk in, and there's this guy behind the bar that was there early to help his friends set up. And, we're talking, and I'm trying to hook him and her up because, he's good looking, she's good looking. They both live in South Bend. I'm never going to live in South Bend. And the fourth thing out of his mouth, I looked at her when he turned around. I was like, I think I'm going to have to take this one. And she's like, yeah, I think he's more into you than me anyway. So needless to say, we stayed at the party all night. And the next day, he invited me to church with him. And I was like, who is this man? And then I invited him to suite tickets and courtside seats at the basketball game. And he's like, who is this woman? And so that was December, and we started dating in January. We bought a house in April. We got engaged on the 50-yard line of the football at Notre Dame Stadium in November. And then we got married on 4/29 because his college football number was 4 and my college soccer number was 29. So, it's been a pretty awesome journey, and we have a Marry Like a Champion Today sign in our bedroom. So we're just doing lots of things like champions over here.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the podcast today. Austin, I would like to thank each of you for taking time out of your week to listen to our podcast, Awaken Kingdom Culture. This past year has been truly amazing. The conversations that Austin and I have been able to share as a father and son, the new relationships that we have made throughout this past year, and the ability to share other people's stories have been life-changing. Each week, I continue to be reminded of the value and impact one story can have. As a listener-supported podcast, I'm grateful for all of you who have partnered with us this past year. If this podcast has spoken to your heart and you'd like to see it continue to awaken other hearts and minds, then I'd like to invite you to become a teammate. If you'd like to partner with Win Awakening, as well as our podcast, you can give at winawakening.org. And please, spread the word about our ministry to all of your friends. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to Awaken Kingdom Culture, Spotify, and YouTube channels, to listen to and watch our podcast weekly, every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern. If you'd like to follow my socials as well and hear about the upcoming podcast news, watch the latest clips, and get an inside look at my life behind the scenes, then follow Ken Karcher on Facebook and X and KP Karcher on Instagram. I encourage you to subscribe to our mailing list and to partner with us as we continue to awaken hearts and minds one story at a time. Now, let's get back to the podcast. So Amber, let me ask you this. So you start your performance group, and your mission is building champion mindsets. There might be someone out there that's going to say, well, describe what is a championship mindset?
That's a great question. So, mindset is such a buzzword in our world today. People think it's not a real thing, but a mindset is an actual protein pattern that gets wired into your brain based on what you think about. So our thoughts actually build brain matter. And so I tell our athletes that mindsets are like Instagram filters, right? You could have one picture, and if you put a lo-fi filter over it, it looks totally different than if you were to put a black and white filter over it. So when we talk about building championship mindsets, what we're looking to do is build these Instagram filters that regardless of the picture in front of you or the situation in front of you, you are looking at that through the lens or through the mind of how a champion would think about that thing, whether it's stress or pressure, success, failure, adversity, right? And so that's what we mean when we say building championship mindsets, is helping people think right about the realities of performance.
So based on your last your response, it'd probably answer this, but do you think this mindset is created or discovered?
I think discovery can lead you to create it. Like if you're like, to me, everything starts with awareness, right? And so it's a little bit of discovery, like being aware of what's possible and maybe what's holding you back. But ultimately, like, you have to work to create that. And you have the capacity to, which I think is really awesome. Like it says in Romans, like we can be transformed by the renewing of our mind, and like, to me, sport, like that's awesome, right? But how the hell do you do that? And to me, sports psychology kind of holds the tools to help us do these things, right? Like as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. Well, literally at the neurological level, our thoughts generate different electromagnetic energies and signals and frequencies that truly create who we are. And I think we can teach these things, and we can train these things, and we can transform people's lives. Not because of me, but because I believe in the Bible, and that it's true. And sports psych is just, palpable way for people to learn some of this stuff and start integrating it into how they function.
My literal next question was, in the Bible, it talks about renewing your mind, Romans 12:2. So you just messed that now.
Oh, your thunder. Sorry, Austin.
No. That's awesome. That's, but based on what you said, if everyone has access to developing this championship mindset, why do you think that not everyone finds it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should be teaching this stuff to kindergartners, I mean, I wish we could get it integrated into our school system. I remember sitting in grad school, we were talking about confidence, and I'm like, I raised my hand and I'm like, this stuff is amazing. Like, how do we sell this? And like, I'm a business person, right? Yeah. So my whole class turns around because they're all psychology undergrads, like really nice people. And they like turn around, they're like, Amber, we're not trying to sell things. We're trying to help people. And I'm like, well, here's the thing about helping people. Like, I'm not just talking about money, but you are going to have to eat. So you might want to think about that. But I mean, sell the value of what we know, because like, I was raised in a good family. I went to Notre Dame. I played soccer there. Like, I didn't know any of this stuff. And this stuff is so powerful. So it's like, how do we get this into more people's hands? So Austin, to me, it's an access thing, right? And like, that's why I have a podcast, and that's why I tried to write a book. It's like, because I just want as many people as possible to like get exposed to this, because like I always say, it's not rocket science, it's just brain science. And we've all had our brain for our whole lives. And so when we learn this stuff, it's not like earth-shattering necessarily, but it does strike you in a way that makes you realize, like, wow, I have a lot more control over my life than I thought. And so, my hope is that people really take personal responsibility and accountability for like who they are and how they operate and how they show up to the world around them. And And yeah, I hope as many people as possible can like get their hands or ears or eyes or heart on this stuff, to try to impact them.
My spirit really just put on my heart, like your passion right there that you just express is really, um, the same passion that the intent of the gospel
Mm.
was always supposed to be. It's like, it's just, how do I get it to people? Like, this has been changing my life. It's blowing my mind. It's awesome. Sometimes in the Christian world that we live in, it's, well, you got to go share the gospel with this. I mean, it should be that exciting and so changing to you. Like, it's changed you so much that you just want people to experience some of the glimpses you're experiencing. So yeah, I get that completely.
Yeah, I know, people, that's kind of a side thought, but people think Christianity is soft and like lame, and it's like, yeah, Jesus was such a badass, like if you think about just passion and purpose and steadfastness and just,
Most mentally tough person out there.
Ever,
Yeah.
and then, when you follow that journey, like it's so exciting, like it's so adventurous and not always great, like we we just went through our third miscarriage actually, and it's like it's heartbreaking, and it's so I actually miscarried before. We have a beautiful, like, Eliana Bell, little 2-year-old, and she's incredible. But before her, I actually miscarried on the day my book released. Was my first miscarriage on 4/11, and the baby's due date was 11/29. So you're seeing this, like, again, this number thing, but it was like it was due 11/29, and then I miscarried on 4/11, and it was like God just said, like, hey, I have this, like, down to the very date, and it's like we go through these seasons of life, and it's like you have the highest of highs of releasing a book, right, that you've worked 2 years on, and then it's like the lowest of lows, this baby that you've been trying for 3 years, you finally get and then lose. And it's like this dichotomy of being able to hold truly two emotions at once, or maybe even more than two. And to me, like, the faith isn't this like Pollyannic thing. It's this relationship with Jesus is like the ability to have these multiple experiences at once. Amen. With belief that, like, Jeremiah 29:11 is still a promise, and
well, it's like what you said, like that verse you keep pulling up, Jeremiah 29:11. I actually spoke in chapel, or in front of our faculty the other day, on Jeremiah 29:11. People don't remember the context that they're literally in Jeremiah 29:11. The Israelites, the best and brightest of Israel, were taken into captivity into Babylon, and they were told by the people around them that we need to fight against. And then Jeremiah sends a message to these people and says, don't listen to them. They're false prophets. I want you to build your house. I want you to make your life in Babylon. In 70 years, I'm going to take you back home. Well, that's great. I'm going to die in 70 years. So how could this plan be good for me? But, like, to me, like, this championship mindset or mental toughness or resilient joy, whatever you call it, it's something to hang your hat on, and that has eternal value and purpose that can fight against any challenge that comes your way. And I think that's the beautiful thing about God, is whether my sports career goes down the toilet, or my dreams fall short, or I do reach my dreams, at the end of the day, they're all temporary things and moments, but the ability to stand firm and to hold fast and to experience life in the midst of all circumstance is God's will. And so, yeah, that verse, every time I hear it, I mean, it rings back the illusion that sometimes we think that circumstances are the thing that change. It's not the mindset or the heart in the circumstances.
That's so well said. So well said. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, thank you.
One of the things that I've been talking a lot with our coaches when we have a bi-monthly group is expectations. I'd be curious, Amber, from your experience, what role do expectations play in creating a champion mindset, and what are some of the benefits or downfalls associated with those expectations?
That's a great question. That was actually my word of the year, the year I met my husband. anyways, I think I love expectations, and I think they can be detrimental if you don't have the right mindset around them. So like to expect good things to happen, right? To expect greatness, to expect favor, to expect the plans and purposes to have a future, right? I think the hard part is when we put our timeline on those expectations, and like the how they come to fruition, or maybe even the exact outcomes, right? Like I think that like we can expect to win the game, but let's say we have 3 penalties in the first quarter, and we get behind early. Like, okay, well then what? Like, does our expectation change at that point? Like, no, it shouldn't. But our what I tell our guys is like, you have to believe not so much just like in the outcome, but like in your ability to navigate when things break down, right? Like that's where our confidence really needs to lie, is like in the ability to call the audible, in the ability to make adjustments, and not that it's going to be perfect on the front end, but that regardless of what happens, we're equipped to navigate it. And then so when you shift your mindset to like pre-snap confidence to post-snap confidence, to me that's what makes expectations then fun, because you can maintain these expectations that you're chasing them, but you're like figuring out how to get there in the process.
That's so well said. That's so well said. Because I mean, I love the pre-snap, post-snap, because post-snap you're waiting for an outcome to dictate how you're thinking. Where pre-snap, you know, like spiritually, we know when you realize what you're equipped with, then you walk into whatever circumstance, you just bring light where you are. So that pre-snap mindset, I think, is that's going to stick with me. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Austin, ask your question, then we'll go to Legacy and close it up here for her.
Okay. The grace one, Deb?
Yeah.
All right. Where does grace and hope fit into this type of mindset? What role does belief and faith play in accessing this mindset? It's really 2 questions.
Yeah, belief is such an important thing, and I think we just see it so much in kids. Like they just don't believe in themselves, and in each other, in the people in their lives, and I think social media can be like a deterrent from that, of like really like, what do you believe? And I know in the back of one of my sports psych textbooks, I was in like this Italian little cafe in Denver, and I'd go there for hours and just like read and write and drink wine, and I was like, in the back of it, I was like, just like, what do I believe as fundamentals of like human high performance? And like, just really being able to sit down with yourself as an athlete, as a coach, as a parent, as a spouse, as a leader. Like, what do I believe about myself, about the world, about success and failure and my job in this space, And I think when you can solidify some of those beliefs, they're just anchors, and you're still going to have to call audibles, and you're still going to have to make hard choices, and there's still going to be a lot of distractions, but it at least gives you kind of a foundation, an operating system from which to navigate. And then, being a champion, like, again, I think this idea of grace and hope are also wrapped up in this idea of expectation and being flexible, and in your, you hold tight the goals and objectives and vision, but like very loosely the modes of getting there, and I think that sometimes when you get in a leadership role or a coach role, like you feel like you have to control all these variables, and you can't. Like, you're talking about human beings that have their own volition. And so it's like, if we can adopt this idea of flexibility and grace for people in the journey and for yourself, that doesn't mean that we don't have high standards. That doesn't mean that we don't have high expectations. That doesn't mean that we don't have incredibly high goals. But otherwise the journey isn't fun, and it's not free. And one of my favorite verses is, it's for freedom's sake that we've been set free.
Yeah.
And so many people live so bound, by expectations or by fears of failure or insecurity or shame or guilt, and it really, it becomes consuming. And so I think when you put all these things together, like the best performers, are free. They operate freely. They can speak freely. They move freely. And that's, one of the biggest blessings in my life are the leaders that I get to serve. Like my husband, head coach Brian Kelly, and then the 3 executives at Lippert, the company that I, work for, our CEO and 2 presidents. Like these guys, I have 5 men in my life, that I get to serve, and they let me be me, like very freely, and to the point that they actually encourage it. And to find that in a team and an organization it's incredible. Like I can do my best work because of that. And so, then as you think about, okay, well, as a leader, what is it like to be led by me? And do I create the same conditions for others that I've been blessed to operate within? And that's a really critical question that I wrestle with a lot as a leader.
2 things came to my heart. Austin knows I always share this with the coaches, but my wife gave a statement to us, again, in a very critical time in our life, and all of us being athletes, giving the grace to fail to somebody allows them the freedom to excel. And like you said, an athlete that's free is going to perform much better than one that's all bound up. And when you use that word, I thought my favorite story in Scripture is of Lazarus. When Jesus is raising him from the grave, for the longest time, I used to focus on the miracle of the resurrection of Lazarus, but I missed the next statement. And the next statement is so important to what you're saying. After he's risen out of the grave, Jesus says to the people that are there, unbind his grave clothes and let him go live. And that's what I hear you doing in what you are working with. You're unbinding people of the bondage that they try to perform in. It's impossible.
Yeah.
But you're saying, go live, go be free.
And then you end up performing better anyway.
Yes.
Totally. We say, Coach Kelly, we talk all the time with our guys about like, listen, there's a difference between excellence and perfection. Perfection's unattainable. There's only one person that, Coach and I did something for the women in our building in February. And, he said, he's like, there's only one person that's walked this earth that's been perfect, and it's none of us in this room, and so, but excellent. And somewhere along the line, I think people have integrated perfection and excellence. Like to be excellent, you have to be perfect. And that's just not true. Excellence assumes failure, but for us, excellence is about how quickly can you recover, and that's not saying to not be upset or to feel pain or frustration or any of that, but it's like, how do you bounce back and keep going? And that too is the beauty of the gospel.
I use with my little elementary PE kids that I teach. I used the basketball one time. I took this basketball and I said, let's talk about the word resiliency. What's resiliency? And I said, the ability to bounce back is eventually what I got to the point to. And I said, what does this basketball do when you drop it? And they said, well, it bounces back. I said, yeah. Well, what if I flatten this basketball? What happens? Well, it doesn't bounce back. And then I said, so the thing that allows something to bounce back is the air that's filling the basketball. And spiritually, it's the aspect of when you're filled with the Spirit, or you're holding to the anchor, or you hold on to a belief that's truth that lasts in all circumstances. You have the ability to bounce back from anything. Yeah. And there's always hope. There's always faith. Yeah. But when you have nothing that you hold on to except for your performance, you're flat. And when you fail, you're stuck down there. And that's why, at least in my own belief, that's why you see so many people depressed, suicidal and hopeless, is because they don't have anything to anchor them or hold them or give them hope in the midst of all circumstances.
It's so good. And that's like, one of my favorite words is, inspire. And because it literally, the definition is to breathe life into, and so it's like the cool part about being on a team, right? Or in a community, or, is that like, that's our job, is to breathe life into each other, to your point, to fill them with air so that we can bounce back, because high performance isn't easy. Right. And you're going to get punched in the face, and it's, you have to figure out how quickly can we recover. And man, we can do that a lot easier when we're full with the right stuff.
Yeah, Austin, let's close it up with legacy here. The last couple.
That's all good.
Go ahead, Dan.
You have.
Okay. So how did you get started? Or no, wrong page. Go ahead, Dad. Just jump ahead.
How have you seen, Amber, what you teach others manifest in your own life?
Great question. I live this stuff every day. I mean, it's important to me. I believe in thoughts and the power of them. My word of the year this year is celebrate. And I read this thing the other day that would, like, the voice or the verse, this is the day that the Lord has made, like, let us rejoice and be glad in it. And so, like, I just, every morning, I've been saying that to myself, like, before I even really opened my eyes, like this day, God, like, I'm like hyping myself up, in bed, just trying to get excited for the day and to, like, not want to miss a moment. You guys know, when you've got little ones, like, they just grow and change so quickly. And it's like, I don't want to miss any of that. And I don't want to take this, like, season of life that we get for granted. And so, just trying to be really intentional about moments and being present and thinking right about the opportunity and joys of the day versus, the exhaustion or the 42 million things going on, or the, the dog that has 2 cones around his neck right now because he had surgery and his neck's so long. Like, we're in like a month and a half of this. So it's like, we got to be hand fed. I mean, those things can add up real quick if you let them. But just being able to sort of put things in perspective, and then, also just in our relationships, just being really mindful of the words that we speak to each other, because our words become other people's thoughts. And so, specifically in our marriage and with Eliana, that's something that we try to just be on top of each other all the time about. Probably me more than my husband. I'm on, wired a little bit more like that, but he's incredible and believes this stuff too. And so it's just really great to be able to have conversations around, like, hey, like, I really appreciated when you said X, Y, and Z, and like how that works for me. And so trying to be mindful of those things.
When someone reads your book, Winning the Mental Game, what message do you want them to walk away with personally?
I think that they can control their mindset, and that some research in brain science has shown us that 75 to 98% of all mental and physical health issues are caused due to our thought life. And so, the things that we're experiencing often begin with what and how we're thinking, and the fact that we can actually have a huge influence over our mental and our physical health and our relationships and our sense of joy and purpose in the world. Like, that doesn't come from external things. That comes from in the inside, and that's great to hear. But my hope is that if they read the book, they'll be actually equipped with some things that can help them do that, right? And truly rewire their brain.
So, Amber, when someone meets Dr. Selking, what do you want them to experience, and how do you want to be remembered?
I want them to have experienced energy, and to Austin, to our world earlier of inspired, like, to have breathed life into them, and whatever that might be, like, whether that's a really hard season that they're going through. It doesn't always look like energy, right? But life, or they're struggling and they, just feel like, wow, I was seen and heard, and feel like I left with a sense of hope, and practically something to do or to apply in my life to get some type of traction in my spirit. And, that's what I hope, the kind of legacy to leave for people.
The last thing we always do is we call it final words or words of life, as you have just said. give you an opportunity to share with our listeners anything that would be final words, and then Austin will follow, and I'll wrap us up.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, like, man, you were created in the image of God. Like, that is incredible. And that doesn't look like anyone else. Like, God is infinite, right? And so he's infinitely creative. And if we can, I see so many people trying to be other people or run from, or it's like, what are some of your tendencies, like things that maybe you've been condemned for over your life? That's probably one of your strengths or part of your core of your essence, right? Like, let's figure out who that person is and come to see and value and appreciate it, but then position it for better impact in the world, and I think like the world needs all of us now more than ever to like be bridge builders and hope bearers and light bringers, and we can't do that if we're just running from ourselves all the time. And so it's not as scary as you think it is to just sit down with yourself and take an inventory, but then also to know that how and who you are is like literally in the image of the creator of the universe. And when you find like a relationship with Jesus, like the same power that rose Christ from the dead lives inside of you. Like that to
Yes.
me is mind boggling. And like, we need to live like that a little bit more, and
Romans 8. Yeah.
and I love that. And how I turn up on that sometimes, could maybe be better directed. I'm working on that. But man, when we realize like there's so much opportunity for goodness and greatness in this world if we understand more about who we are as individuals, and then tap into the power of Christ that's inside of us, and then live that, to the world around us, just day by day though, and moment by moment. Like, I think sometimes we make it be such a big thing, and it's not. It's just one choice at a time, thinking right and being willing to show up as the person that you've been made to be.
Yeah. Well, Dad, the verse you've been talking about, I'm just laughing because you keep hitting these verses. I mean, that's something Dad and he's like, I think it was a couple months ago, he talks about how, we have the very, the resurrected Christ, life. We have access to that, but we don't live out of that. And just, so it just makes me smile. But overall, first off, thank you for taking your time. I mean, this was an absolute blessing for us to just sit and hear your story, and then ultimately see your heart and then your mind as well. But, God, I can see God's doing amazing things in you, through you, with people, in high performing environments. And I know for me that, the thing I guess that was most obvious to me is, you just exude positivity, and it's not fake. It's just, you can tell that what you're talking about, it's resonated with you first. And I think that's obviously the greatest testimony any one of us can have, is that what we believe is just flowing out of us, as opposed to me always going and saying it, because it's something that you can see, and it's contagious. So I know for me, you spoke life today, you spoke hope, but once again, I sense the presence of God just flowing through you. So thank you for your time and being willing to come up on this. Cause I think the last thing is, the title of this podcast, Awaken Kingdom Culture, and everyone who listens to this, knows we go through this a couple times. I at least say it a couple times, but like, once again, it's about people realizing their value and their purpose and what they have, because when they do, and he transforms them, and then it comes out of them, that's how the kingdom comes here to this earth, and that's how culture changes. And I think it's one person, one story, one interaction at a time, moment by moment, just like you said, different thinking, renewing of our thoughts, aligning with our heart and our mind. And, that's where, I believe his kingdom, his desire comes here to this earth. So I felt like your story did that for me today. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, guys. I appreciate the work that you're doing, and just it was inspiring for me too. Like, cause I haven't thought about some of those things in a very long time. And I think sometimes, we get into the rhythms of life because we get disconnected from some of our, original, I don't know, storylines, of our own lives. And so just having the opportunity to reflect on those today was equally as inspiring to me. And I think realigning for me, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you.
Well, I guess I got to start by saying, wow. And your book doesn't do you justice, Amber. I think you need to get with your editor and tell them either on the front or back, need a big picture of you with a smile. Because I'll tell you what a blessing. One of the things you said, we say all the time when we talk to people, the ability to understand who you are, what you already possess, and how do you live from it in a place of victory. And you said that. And the other thing, I thought of John chapter 1 when I was listening to you, and I was just smiling. Today, Austin and I experienced a little bit of heaven because you were a picture of light, life, and love. And we are grateful for the time we've had with you. You got a contagious smile. You got energy and joy just coming out of your eyes, and you're full of life. And so those that will get to work with you, I know I'll recommend you to people that I know around this industry. And just thank you for your time. We appreciate you. And all those that listen to Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time.